Today on our space, the inheritance of absence, when my father's trust fund finally paid what he owed. Karma comes after everyone eventually. You can't get away with screwing people over your whole life. I don't care who you are. I remember reading those words somewhere years ago and thinking how rarely life actually works that way. How the people who hurt us often never face consequences. How the scales rarely balance on their own. But sometimes life surprises you with a perfect moment of poetic justice, arriving just when you've stopped looking for it. Let me start from the beginning. Maybe you'll understand. My father is a man who has always expected the world to bend to his will. When he met my mother, she was brilliant and driven, in the middle of her PhD program, destined to revolutionize treatment for children with a specific neurological condition. She was fire and determination and purpose. He was old money and entitlement, coasting on a trust fund that ensured he'd never need to work a day in his life. Sometimes I wonder what she saw in him, perhaps a brief escape from the intensity of her research, perhaps a glimpse of charm he's since misplaced. Whatever it was, it didn't last. When she got pregnant with me, his true colors emerged like a stain spreading across fabric. "Quit your program," he told her. "Be a good little wife and mother." As if her dreams, her calling to help vulnerable children, her years of education should all evaporate the moment motherhood entered the equation. As if her purpose now was simply to orbit his life, to raise his child while he continued his leisurely existence, funded by generations of family wealth he did nothing to earn. My mother, thank God, refused. She filed for divorce instead. The prenup she'd signed left her with almost nothing, but she had something far more valuable than money. She had her mind, her determination, and a community of colleagues who respected her work. My father, freed from any responsibility he hadn't chosen, promptly moved back to Europe, leaving his pregnant ex-wife and unborn child behind without a backward glance. His parents, my paternal grandparents, never knew I existed. He simply erased us from his narrative, started fresh across an ocean, and left us to fend for ourselves in this world, as my grandparents would later put it. Not that we suffered. My mother finished her PhD while raising me, eventually becoming a leading expert in her field. She quite literally wrote the book on treating the condition she specialized in. My maternal grandparents were extraordinary people who took me exploring through the wilds of Western Canada every summer, teaching me how to identify edible plants, track animals, and navigate by the stars. My childhood wasn't defined by my father's absence, but by my mother's presence, by her unwavering love and dedication. The child support checks my father was legally obligated to send never came. It didn't really matter. My mother made good money, and we lived comfortably in what I'd call upper-middle-class stability. I never thought about him much, this stranger across an ocean who shared my DNA but nothing else. He was a faded photograph, a story without an ending, irrelevant to the life we'd built without him. Until now, until the wedding. I'm 28 now and getting married to the love of my life. We met at university 8 years ago, that magical moment when you look across a crowded room and somehow know that person is going to matter. He's brilliant and kind and funny in that understated way that makes everyday life feel like an adventure. He really is my lobster, as Rachel would say in Friends, the one you're meant to grow old with, claws entwined until the very end. My fiancée comes from a large, boisterous family from the same European city where my father relocated all those years ago. It's a coincidence that would seem far-fetched in fiction, yet here we are. His grandfather and my paternal grandfather move in the same social circles, their businesses intertwined in the way of old money in small, exclusive communities. So when news of our engagement reached my fiancé's family overseas, it also reached ears I never expected would hear of me at all, my paternal grandparents. The first email from them arrived on a Tuesday morning. I almost deleted it, assuming it was spam. Who reaches out after 28 years of silence? But curiosity won out, and I opened it to find a carefully worded note expressing shock at discovering my existence, joy at finding out I was engaged, and a tentative request to meet before the wedding. They wanted to come to Canada to meet the granddaughter they never knew they had. I showed the email to my mother, half expecting her to be angry, to tell me to delete it and move on. Instead, she sighed and said, "They're not him, honey. They might be good people who were kept in the dark. Everyone deserves a chance to prove who they really are." So I agreed. We arranged for them to visit 3 months before the wedding. I spent those months oscillating between excitement and dread. What if they were just like him? What if they were nothing like him? What would I even say to these strangers who shared my blood but not my history? The day they arrived, I nearly backed out. My fiancé squeezed my hand as we waited at the airport arrivals gate. "Whatever happens," he whispered, "we face it together." And then they were there, my grandfather with his shock of white hair and twinkling eyes, looking remarkably like the grandfather from The Parent Trap, as I'd later realize from old photos they shared. My grandmother, elegant and nervous, both of them scanning the crowd with such obvious hope that something in my chest loosened. "Alexandra," my grandmother said when they spotted us, her voice catching on my name. And then they were hugging me, tentatively at first, then fiercely, as if trying to make up for 28 years of missed embraces in a single moment. Over the following days, we got to know each other. They brought old family albums, shared stories of a heritage I'd never known was mine. They asked endless questions about my life, my mother, my education, my interests. They listened with genuine interest and growing dismay as I told them about growing up without their son, about the child support that never came, about building a life that never included him. "He told us you didn't want anything to do with our family," my grandfather said one evening, his voice heavy with the realization that he'd been lied to for decades. "He said your mother had remarried and her new husband had adopted you." "My mother never remarried," I told them. "She's had a special friend since I was 5. He taught me to swear in Colombian Spanish and came to every school play, but she never legally tied herself to anyone else after your son." The look that passed between them was a storm of emotion, anger, grief, determination. They excused themselves early that night, and the next morning my grandfather asked to speak with me privately. "What your father did was unforgivable," he said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "Not just abandoning you, but lying to us, depriving us of knowing our granddaughter. In our family, we believe in taking responsibility for our actions and making amends when we've failed." He handed me an envelope. Inside was a check, a number so large I thought at first I was miscounting zeros. There was also a letter from their lawyer explaining that they had calculated the exact amount of child support my father should have paid over the years, plus interest, plus the average cost of the post-secondary education he should have contributed to. This was their wedding gift to me, a way to begin making things right. What they didn't tell me then, what I would discover later, was that this money hadn't come from their personal accounts. They had directed their lawyers to deduct it from my father's yearly draw on his trust fund. They had essentially forced him to pay what he had owed all along. They also revealed that they had established a trust fund for me, as they had done for all their grandchildren upon birth. The money for mine, coming 28 years late, had also been taken from my father's share. "If he had told us about you when you were born," my grandfather explained, "this would have been set up then, and the principal would have grown all these years. He cost you that security and opportunity, so it's only fair it comes from his portion now." It wasn't until after they'd returned to Europe that the furious emails and calls from my father began. He had discovered what his parents had done and was livid. His messages alternated between rage and pathetic attempts at manipulation. How dare I accept this money? How his current wife and children would suffer because of my greed. How he might actually need to get a job for the first time in his life. The horror. "Give it back," he demanded in his most recent call. "My family doesn't deserve to suffer because of some vindictive gesture." I almost laughed. "Your family? I'm your family too. Or did you forget about the daughter you abandoned?" "That was different," he sputtered. "Your mother chose to raise you alone." "No," I corrected him. "You chose not to raise me at all." "There's a difference." He hung up, but the calls and messages continue. His oldest son, my half-brother I never knew existed, even posted about the situation online, sharing his own perspective. He's not angry with me, surprisingly, but with his father. Learning about a sister he never knew, about the lies his father told, has shaken his world too. We've started messaging privately, tentatively building a relationship neither of us expected to have. The truth is, I don't need this money. My fiancé and I both have good careers. We've been saving for our future. We're not wealthy like my father's family, but we're comfortable and secure. My first thought was to give it all to my mother, to repay her for raising me alone, for never making me feel like I was missing anything despite my father's absence. But when I took her to lunch yesterday and told her my plan, she laughed. "Honey, I have no debt. None. The book I wrote has been doing well, and the consulting work keeps me more than comfortable." It had never occurred to me to think about my mother's finances. She had always provided so seamlessly that I'd never questioned our stability. Together, we decided on something better, a scholarship fund for students entering her field of study, a way to help future generations of researchers continue the work she's passionate about. It feels right somehow, turning my father's neglect into something that will help children for years to come, the very work he tried to force her to abandon. I'm keeping some of it, of course, enough to pay off my car, to contribute to our wedding, to feel secure as we start our lives together. And I've booked a surprise trip for my mother and her special friend for after the wedding, a month in South America where he can teach her some more Colombian Spanish in his homeland. The irony isn't lost on me. My father, who wanted my mother to sacrifice her career for his convenience, is now involuntarily funding other women's education in that exact field. The man who refused to support his child is now, against his will, supporting many. Is it petty that I find satisfaction in this? Perhaps. Am I wrong for not giving back money that, legally and morally, should have been provided for my upbringing years ago? For accepting a trust fund that all my half-siblings received without question at birth? I don't think so. This isn't about the money. It's about accountability, about consequences finally catching up after decades of absence. It's about a wrong being at least partially righted, not by my seeking revenge, but simply by the truth finally coming to light. My wedding is in 2 months. My paternal grandparents will be there, seated in the front row alongside my mother and her special friend. My half-brother is coming too, a tentative new relationship I never expected to have. My father is not invited. Some absences are best left permanent. What would you do in my position? Would you keep money that was rightfully yours but that you didn't necessarily need? Would you forge relationships with family members who were kept from you, or would you maintain the boundaries that have defined your life until now? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more. Until next time, remember that family isn't defined by obligation or blood alone. It's built on choice, on showing up, on being present for the moments that matter. Sometimes the family we create matters far more than the family we're born into.